Hello, YouTube Galfer here, and welcome to my top 10 underrated Doctor Who stories of all time. Now today I am going to be counting down 10 Doctor Who stories which appeal to me, but not that too well to other Doctor Who fans. So there have been many stories which everyone forgets about, people don't like that much, but every story has its lovers and its haters. So, starting the list at number 10, we do have the 12th Doctor story, Time Heist. Now, Time Heist is episode 5 of series 8 of Doctor Who. Now, I do really like Time Heist. I like the guest stars, the setting, the monster. I think this story is very underrated because it is submerged in between two brilliant Doctor Who stories. It's submerged in between Listen and The Caretaker, which are two excellent stories. So I can see why it's underrated. People forget about Time Heist. Now moving on to number 9, we do have an 11th Doctor story. This is episode 3 of series 6. It is The Curse of the Black Spot. Now the Curse of the Black Spot you forget about as well, seeing as it's submerged in between two brilliant Doctor Who stories, both The Impossible Astronaut, Dash Day of the Moon, and The Doctor's Wife, which I'm not too fond of. Now, The Curse of the Black Spot, reasons why it's underrated. I think it's the pirates. People don't like pirate episodes, because there is another pirate episode on this list, so that explains why people don't like pirates in Doctor Who. I personally like pirates in Doctor Who. They're good historical heirloom to have. But other than that, let's move on to number 8. At number 8, we do have the Krotons. Now, the Krotons is extremely underrated. Now, the Krotons is an excellent Second Doctor story. In fact, it is one of my favourites, probably my third favourite Second Doctor story. I do like the Krotons in this story. I do like the Second Doctor, I do like the setting, I do like the companions. But I think what lets this story down and why it's underrated is the Krotons. They're badly designed, so it doesn't appeal to fans that much. But it's 1960s, you can't expect it to be that good. Now moving on to number 7, we do have a 10th Doctor story. This is The Idiot's Lantern. Now I do absolutely love The Idiot's Lantern, it's extremely underrated, and I do like the horror movie feel to it. No pieces on people, that's so horror film-ish. Yeah, I do like The Idiot's Lantern. It's extremely underrated. It's written by Mark Gatiss. It's set in the 1950s. I do like it. Now, moving on to number 6, we do have my third most favourite Doctor Who story of all time. This is The Rescue, a 2-part First Doctor Who story. Now, The Rescue, reasons why it's underrated. Well, again, it is submerged in between two brilliant Doctor Who stories, both the Dalek invasion of Earth and the Romans. So, enough about The Rescue, let's move on to number 5. Well, at number 5, we do have the second pirate story of the list. It is The Pirate Planet, the second story of the Key to Time series. Now, The Pirate Planet, just a sub-note here, it is getting a Target novel next year in 2017. But reasons why it's underrated. Well, it is again, like pretty much all these stories, it's submerged in between some brilliant stories. The Stones of Blood, the Androids of Tara, the Armageddon Factor, the Rebus Operation. This series is so strong, and The Pirate Planet isn't so strong. The Pirate Planet you forget about. No wonder it hasn't got a Target novel until now. No wonder. Now, moving on to number 4, we do have a 5th Doctor story. This 5th Doctor story is The Awakening, a 2-part Doctor Who story. I do love The Awakening. Now, The Awakening, reasons why it's underrated. It's 2 parts, only lasts for 50 minutes. You see, it would have only been on 1 week then, so if you say missed it, you can watch it again. So that makes it underrated. But now you can watch it again, but it needs to have a fan base rebuilt for this story, I think, because people just forget about it. So moving on to number 3, we do have the first Doctor story, a 4-part story, which is in the archives. It is the Ark. Yes, the Ark. Now, the Ark, reasons why it's underrated, and it shouldn't be underrated. It is in between two holy grails of missing Doctor Who stories, both the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve and the Celestial Toymaker. Very overrated, unfound Doctor Who stories. And the Ark has been found. People forget about the Ark, the same as most stories on this list. It's 4 parts, and it's excellent in my opinion. I do love the Ark. Now, moving on to number 2, we do have a 3rd Doctor story. This 3rd Doctor story is from Season 7 of Doctor Who. It is no other than the Ambassadors of Death. Yes, the Ambassadors of Death. It is an excellent Doctor Who story, but what I think lets it down is it is in such a strong Doctor Who season, it is submerged within them. You see, you have Spearhead from Space, which is absolute gold, Doctor Who and the Silurians, which is absolute gold and incredibly overrated, and then you have Inferno, which is absolute gold and again overrated. But the Ambassadors of Death, you forget about. You forget about the Ambassadors of Death, because it is in such a strong Doctor Who series. I really enjoyed the Ambassadors of Death, and a lot of other people enjoyed the Ambassadors of Death, but not as much as the other stories in that season. So, now, moving on to number 1. But before we get to number 1, I'm just going to remind you of what's been on this list. So at number 10 we did have Time Heist, number 9 was Curse of the Black Spot, 8 was the Krotons, 7 was the Idiot's Lantern, 6 was The Rescue, 5 was The Pirate Planet, 4 was The Awakening, 3 was The Ark, 2 was The Ambassador of Death, and number 1 is another 5th Doctor story, another 5th Doctor 2-parter. This is in between The King's Demons and Black Orchid. Yes, it is Black Orchid. How underrated can you get? Oh, you completely forget about this story, just like The Awakening, just like The Rescue, just like The Ambassador of Death, just like all the stories on this list. And people don't like this story, and I do. Like a lot of people, they like this story, but they don't like it. Why do people not like Black Orchid? I don't know. It is such a good idea for a story, a murder mystery setting. I think why it's underrated is it's a purely historical story. There's no sci-fi elements in it apart from the TARDIS. That's why Black Orchid is number 1 on my list of top 10 underrated Doctor Who stories. Now, just remember, this is my opinion, but please let me know what is your most underrated Doctor Who story. Leave it in the comments below. Goodbye.